From Kenan Stadium in Chapel Hill, this is TarHillIllustrated.com. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. We're here on the Kenan Stadium turf following North Carolina's spring football game, the first one they've had since 2019. Kind of crazy to say with the year we've gone through in 2020. But AJ, we're in 2021 now. 2021 football Tar Heels is something we've been covering throughout the spring, obviously before that as well. But one of the major themes, what we're going to talk about in this one is, for most people that have watched these videos and to visit our site on a continuous basis, we've done a ton of podcasts on them throughout the spring. Yep. We've written a ton of articles on them throughout the spring. We've talked to Mac, Jay, Bateman, Phil Longo, a bunch of players. And I think today, we were talking about this a little bit off camera, I think really what we took away from today is kind of what we saw kind of reaffirmed what we have been writing about and discussing in these podcasts over the past month or so. Yeah. I think that was kind of the main takeaway from today. But overall, I thought defensively, I thought start to finish, first guy to last guy, I thought everybody looked pretty good. Offensively, I thought a few guys stood out, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But overall, I think the main takeaway from today is what we thought we knew got reaffirmed. Well,
So grateful that Jeremy Sharp, the media relations guy for football, Mac's right-hand man, and Mac, wanted the media here so we could more appropriately report to Carolina fans, the people watching this stuff, or people just interested in college football and want to check this program out. Well, we could tell you guys what this team's all about, because they're not going to be able to hide them from their opponents. So, some coaches, some programs treat every day in the football program like they're planning the D-Day invasion.
I love that analogy, by the way.
And they don't do that here because everyone's going to see what they're all about anyway. So to best cover this program, we've got to see these kids. Mm-hmm. And we would have conversations in the stands. We were at 3 practices that were open in the media. And we'd sit in the stands for the last 2 because we saw scrimmages, but we weren't allowed to shoot videos or photos or anything like that. So we'd sit taking notes, watching the kids. And all the things we talked about the last month that we'd seen from this team, we saw in some form or another today. They are unbelievably loaded with talent.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it.
I wrote a piece about how, man, when you just walk out here, the first time we were at practice, it was their 3rd practice of the spring, and it was so obvious, and this is not a slight to the prior coaching staff, it's just they just have a lot more dudes. Mm-hmm. You go 3 or 4 deep in a position group in drills a few years ago, and you're like, okay, there was a definite drop-off. Now, if there's a drop-off, it's just because maybe a more talented but less experienced kid is 5th, 6th, and 7th. They've just got dudes everywhere, every position group, even running back. A lot of people are saying, boy, how are they going to overcome losing Javonte Williams and Michael Carter? Well, okay, you don't overcome that. You don't replace them. You just move forward with what you got. Mm-hmm. And they got 6 guys in that room I think that they're fairly comfortable with. Certainly 4 of them I think are going to really be competing for opportunities this fall. So the running back room's in good shape. It's just a lot of dudes that the people that are watching this video right now don't really know much about. Yeah. But we've seen these guys 4 times now, and we're going to go over some of the position groups here in a minute. But I think the takeaway today is this program is headed in the right direction. They have got a lot more speed. They've got more size up front that can move. They've got depth at every position group, and some of the better players didn't even play today. And the way everything's kind of coming together, you can see this team fortifying, this program fortifying itself to where when they have those big moments in 2021, the ones that they maybe didn't always play so well in 2020, they're going to be better prepared to handle those moments in 2021, which is why I think this club has a chance to be really, really good and do something very special that hasn't been done around here very often.
Agreed. You talked about Carolina having dudes, and you also mentioned diving into a couple of different position groups. It's a perfect segue to kind of what I want to talk about now. We were talking a little bit in the press box before we came down here. I think I may have asked you, kind of what stood out to you today, and you said one of the biggest things was D-line and offensive line. They've got bodies down there now, and not only bodies that, just bodies down there. They got guys that look physically ready to play. They had a few guys diving into the depth today that look really good. We've talked a lot about Diego Pounds on the O-line for a long time. I remember seeing him a couple of times on a line of scrimmage lined up, and you're like, how is he a true freshman out there? He's bigger than everybody down there. So offensive line, I think you've got a lot more bodies. You're obviously returning all the starters, but I think you've got other guys behind them that are more ready-made to come in and play. On the defensive line, I think it's kind of the same story. We've seen Dev Evans. I thought he had a pretty good game today as well. I've heard that from a few Carolina fans as well. looks like a lot bigger of a guy. We also got to talk to him for the first time. You can see the strides that he's made, not only physically, but learning the playbook and whatnot. Javar Ritzie, a freshman that's played a little bit today, who's impressed us all throughout the spring. And then, you know, I really even mentioned Tamon Fox, who barely played today, and Tyrone Hopper, which I'm not quite sure if he played today. I don't remember seeing him on a snap. I would think he probably played at some point. But
a lot of the older guys who have a ton of reps, who play a ton of snaps, they didn't really play. Like Gemmel didn't play at all.
Yeah, so it was a little bit of a mixed bag in that respect. But overall, I think when you look at those two position groups in particular, that to me kind of paints the picture of the direction that this program is headed in. Because when Mac first took over, they didn't have those kind of guys in the trenches. I think they're starting to develop that depth.
A lot of people love the bells and whistles, but I've used this example before. I know it's kind of, my wife thinks it's really corny, but she also is not a football person. But, you know, when you're building a football program, it's like getting the right Christmas tree at Christmas time. You're not just going to go get that Charlie Brown tree and chuck a bunch of ornaments on it and say, hey, that's good stuff. You got to go find the right tree. The tree is the foundation. And then you put a bunch of bells and whistles, decorations on the tree. Carolina has bells and whistles, and they had bells and whistles the last couple of years. That's very clear. The draft will tell us that next week. However, the foundation, the tree itself, needed more bulk, needed more stuff. It needed to fill out a little bit more. And what you're talking about is that tree filling out on both lines of scrimmage. The offensive line, they returned 118 career starts, I think.
Wow.
They're one of the better offensive lines in the country, especially when it comes to run blocking, which is why gauging the young defensive linemen against this line can be so valuable, because they're going up against some guys. A lot of guys are going to be in NFL camp. Some are going to play in the NFL. But there's depth behind them now. It's not just Ed Montilus. It's not just Kieran Johnson. You've got Jonathan Adorno, William Barnes.
I thought he looked well today, too.
I gave you props to one of the to a tweet today, something that you said about Barnes. He was playing right guard. He was playing right tackle. He looked really good. The guy that was so ballyhooed when he signed, looks like he's starting to find that guy on the football field now. They go 8-9 deep on the offensive line, and the defensive line, Mac told us afterward, he feels really good about 6 deep right now as far as defensive linemen that can also rush the passer. You got to be able to rush the passer in the modern day of college football. And I think they could go to 9 or 10, especially in run situations. And this is just April. We're talking 4 months from now when they really need to have these guys ready. So you're always going to have attrition at the line of scrimmage. They didn't have much on the offensive line last year.
No.
But they might have it this year. You just never know. A lot of freak injuries at the line of scrimmage, knees and ankles and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have attrition. And what do the Ohio States and Clemsons and Alabamas have? They have the ability to absorb some of that attrition. That's how you can lose some guys and not miss a beat the week later. North Carolina learned a couple years ago they couldn't do that. They could lose a few really good players, and all of a sudden there was a significant drop-off. The program is growing at the line of scrimmage to the point where they're going to be able to absorb some attrition, and if they don't have that attrition, guys are going to stay fresh. The defensive line will be better this year for no other reason than they're going to be fresh in the fourth quarter, fresh late in the first half when they gave up a lot of points last year, and fresher in the fourth quarter. So they'll be better just for that reason alone. And if there is attrition, I think they can absorb it better now than they have been able to really in a long time. You go back several coaching staffs. The last time they were able to absorb the kind of attrition that could come this year, both lines of scrimmage, that I think this team can now deal with.
One last thing I want to talk about real quick. I'm going to kind of talk about 2 guys that stood out to me the most today. They're going to be a little bit younger, and then I'll kick it to you to kind of maybe talk about 2 guys that stood out to you. For me, there's a couple ways I can go with this. I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to go with Rawad Dilworth and Power Eccles. There was a couple plays, particularly, I guess, in the second half of the scrimmage, whatever you want to call it. I'm still trying to figure out the rules they use out there. But there was one tackle they made in the backfield to end a drive where they hit the guy at the same time, basically. They're really excited about that. We've heard people talk about the fact that Rawad Dilworth is a guy that's speedy and fast, but maybe isn't physically ready yet today. Obviously, you're not going to take away but so much from a spring game, but I thought those 2 guys in particular, in terms of young guys that stood out to me, I thought they performed a little bit better than I maybe expected them to. We've talked about them a lot also during the podcast we've done leading up from the 3 open practices we've been to. Even Matt came out and said today, they both played a little bit better today than I expected based on kind of their experience and where they're at in their development right now. So those are the 2 guys that kind of stood out to me the most. But any 2 guys in particular that kind of caught your eye today?
Yeah, well, let me comment on them because
go ahead.
Right over here, remember watching the linebackers in the 3rd practice? The first practice we were allowed into was the 3rd practice. And I stood there for 20 minutes and watched Rah-Rah get lectured and coached up after. These were just drill reps. And he was getting coached up big time. And you could almost see his head spinning a little bit. And we talked about it. I said, that's not a negative to Rah-Rah. It's his third college practice.
What you expect,
Everyone's head's going to... Your third day on the job anywhere, your head's still spinning, no matter what job it is. What we saw in the 4 weeks since then is a guy whose head wasn't spinning as much today, a guy who has amazing football instincts, and he was relying on that. And he made plays. You know, he is not the biggest guy. He's not as big and strong as he's going to be in a year from now. But you know what? When you hit a guy going fast, it kind of increases the punishment level when you actually make contact. I don't know if the two of them are going to play a lot on defense this year. I mean, I could see Rah-Rah being a terror on special teams. But if there is attrition at linebacker and you have to go with an 18 and a 19-year-old at some point in some capacity back there, these are two kids that by the time September rolls around, that will be able to handle it a lot better than a lot of guys they brought in this program in the past. So their talent level is off the charts. Power's a little more physical, looks physically like he's a little bit more ready for this, but they were both really good today. And that's kind of the thing I want to talk about as well. Some of the more talented guys in this program right now are also the least experienced. So when we talk about how loaded the team is, how loaded North Carolina football is right now, we're including the eye candy that is Rah-Rah, the eye candy that is Gavin Blackwell, the eye candy that is Diego Pounds, but they're not fully fortified, ready to go out there and play 4 quarters against Miami or Clemson or something like that. They're not ready to do that yet. So this program is unbelievably loaded with talent, but a lot of those guys aren't really ready yet, or they're not as ready as they're going to be maybe in October and certainly in November and absolutely in 2022. So I think what's going to be really interesting to see what the coaching staff does when they evaluate everything in the offseason. The players are going to have player-led practices in the offseason, and then they reconvene fully in August for fall camp, is where the balance is between the super experienced guys that know what to do and are trustworthy, but these young studs that could come up and make a great play one play and then take themselves out of the next play. That's kind of what will be really interesting to see how that plays out once August gets here and we're allowed to come in and watch practices and stuff. It's a great problem to have, but I think a little bit of danger for fans to think, wow, they're going to go 12-0 because look at the composite talent they have. Well, a lot of those highly talented kids, those supremely talented kids, aren't quite ready to lead you to 12-0 yet, but they can push the older guys. And they can make the older guys better, and vice versa, they'll make them better because they can learn from the Reva Hosiks, they can learn from the Antoine Greens, they can learn from all those guys and get better in a hurry as well. So that's the thing I think that's really interesting about where the program is and where it's headed. The great thing, if you're a Carolina fan, is, okay, whatever happens this year, Sam leaves and all that, they're going to lose some guys, but man, they are really prepared. They're building a foundation to where 22 they could be better in 21, even losing guys like Sam, because they should be better on the defensive line, they should be better in the secondary, they should be better collectively at wide receiver. So I think that's what's exciting about North Carolina football, because it's not just about the 2021 team. It's about 22, it's about 23. They're building this thing out. They're not building it to make a run and then see what happens afterward. They're building this thing out to where the expectations people have right now should become an annual thing. The parts are there, the pieces are coming together, recruiting is going to continue doing what recruiting has done, and I think what we watched today was a spring game of a program very different than the spring game was in 2019, the last time they had one.
Oh yeah, for sure. There
was a ton of uncertainty back then. Right now, the only uncertainty is how many games do they win this year? Can they compete for something national? Will Sam contend for the Heisman Trophy all season long? And will they reach some of the goals that a lot of people have for them, which includes winning the Coastal Division, playing Clemson in the ACC title game, maybe going to the CFP? That's not crazy talk now.
No, it's
and it's not crazy talk just for 21. I think it's not crazy talk for 22 and 23. This program is in as good a shape right now it has been since Mac left, and in some ways it's in better shape than when Mac left. You know why? Because he's not leaving.
Yeah, that's a good
He's
point.
going to see this thing through for a few years.
Exactly.
Carolina football fans, you guys should be very, very excited right now.
Totally agree. You know, depth breeds competition. Competition usually breeds success.
Absolutely.
It's nothing but a good thing when it comes to a team. So it's a good place to wrap it up, though, AJ. It's a little windy and a little rainy out here. Yeah, it's does not feel
It's
like April.
April 24th, and it's cold.
Yeah, and that was one of the unfortunate things before we wrap it up to talk about was just, all the hype kind of around the spring game, and then it's about the worst day we're going to have, not only in the past week, but going forward as well. I think it's the only day it's really supposed to rain, but
Miss King, Andrew, it feels like football season.
Yeah,
so,
you're not lying. It does. It's very appropriate in that respect. But
I have to give Dina a shout out.
Always have to.
And shout out to Kevin Roy and Jenna Miller for being out here on the field for 2.5 hours in this crap today and getting us videos and photos, and they do great work, so we're appreciative to them doing that out here when we got to be in the warm, dry press box.
Yeah, and I'm especially appreciative because I'm usually the grunt out here doing all that work and getting soaked. So, yeah, shout out Kevin and shout out Jenna for doing that. I know, right? It was fun to see. That was the first time we've sat together in a press box in a long time, but it's a good place to wrap it up, AJ. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Make sure you guys head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com for all your recap and analysis from today's spring game, and also stay tuned for some podcasts coming out over the next day or so on the spring game as well. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next one. Thanks.